than 2 hours of deliberating, a Smith County jury found a Kemp man guilty of directing criminal street gang activity. This man, Kevin Higgins, is the former national president of the Cossacks Motorcycle Club. As KLTV7's Lauren Tier tells us, his retrial is not over just yet.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Kevin Higgins, to be guilty of the offense of directing activities of a criminal street gang.
In a second attempt to convict 58-year-old Kevin Higgins of Kemp, the jury determined the state proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Higgins was connected to a string of criminal activity in his time as both national vice president and national president of the Cossacks Motorcycle Club. This including aggravated assaults and the 2020 murder of rival gang member Brandon Edwards of Ben Wheeler. In closing arguments, Smith County Assistant DA Casey Sirianni called Higgins' time as national president, quote, a violent regime in our own backyard.
Make no mistake, this man is the reason that Brandon Edwards is dead. He is the reason for the escalation of violence right here. He is the reason that Chad Crow was made an immediate sergeant at arms.
Defense attorney Eric Platten argued there is no written or recorded evidence of Higgins giving any violent orders. He said the smash on sight orders came from co-defendant Chad Kroll.
You can't hold Mr. Higgins responsible for what Chad Kroll did. They want me to.
Ultimately, the jury heard testimony from several former Cossacks, investigators, and experts. They delivered their guilty verdict around 3:45 this afternoon and will return for sentencing next week. Lauren Tier, KLTV 7 News.
And Higgins faces 25 years to life in prison. Now, the first time this case went to trial last month, it ended with a mistrial because of a hung jury.